when it comes to mixing, what should you focus on the most? In my opinion, automation, baby. You got to focus on automation because that's the thing that can't be copied. No matter how you look at everything we do, there's an infinite number of combinations of permutations of I want EQ into compression, compression into EQ. This, I want to use the saturation, the color, whatever you're doing, and however you're doing it, it will still break down ultimately to what you want to focus the attention of the listener on. Do you want to push the bass up a little here? Are you, do you think the drums should have a little more push on the downbeat of the chorus? Or like, where are you pushing and pulling? Because the more you study the mixes of guys like Bob Clearmountain or Andy Wallace, you'll realize that a lot of these guys make the mixes sound the way they do because of where they pull your attention at what time. And that cannot be repeated. Nobody's ever going to be able to get inside their head to know exactly why and when they're doing things, and it's never the same. In other words, they're reacting to what they're hearing. Like an athlete, you could track different athletes. They'll never move to the ball the exact same way when a ground ball is hit or something, if we're talking about baseball. It's like everybody's going to react different based on what's being fed to them at that moment. So you could do 100,000 athletes. No one's ever going to take the exact same path and look the exact same way. It's just like with mixing. The way I think about this is that if you dedicate, let's just say on an average, call it 4 to 7 hours on a mix, right? Half of the time you spend mixing the song, you should be thinking about automation moves, which really means you got to get done with dialing up your first inkling and instinct for EQ, maybe some compression if it needs it, getting the thing to sound good on a basic balance in an hour or two. I mean, if we're talking about a total of, let's say, 4 to 5 hours on the song, you got to dial that stuff in quick, which is good. I recommend doing this if you haven't ever tried it, but put some kind of clock up, not so you can focus on it and be like, the time's ticking. It's just so you can track how long it takes you to get through and move through something. Believe me when I tell you, there's not going to be something you can ever stick to, but it's good to know how long it takes for you to just get everything in a position to sound good on an average basis. You can't really judge this on one song or two songs. You can't really judge it if you're dealing with, different genres so much. So with a grain of salt, what I'm saying, but I like to know, okay, it's been an hour. Where am I? It's been 2 hours. Where am I? I like to know that. So what I found is when I run the clock just to see, I'm generally moving quicker because I'm aware that the time is ticking. And as that happens, I'm more willing to trust myself and my first inkling and my first decision, my gut reactions, like an athlete would when they're fielding a ball or something. They don't got time to second guess it. That ball's going to be past them. They got to do what they're going to do. And I think that is something that we need to put into what we're doing, even though it's not the same thing. It's not a sport. We sort of have to treat it like we're playing an instrument. And if you've ever played an instrument in a band, you could be soloing or something, and then the changes are happening as you go, which means you are going to run out of time if you overthink. That's why you have to be non-thinking really and just acting on the thoughts rather than overthinking them before, because then you'll miss the change. You're going to run out of time. You don't have an endless amount of time. Once we put this thought process into mixing, you will build trust in your decisions more, because I'm telling you, 9 times out of 10, that first decision is probably the right one. So when I go through, in my prep process, I'm not counting that as time into the mix, because we could all, dedicate an hour to prep the mix. Like, let's say it takes that. Sometimes it does. Decide, okay, an hour, we prep everything, we get ready to go. Then it becomes a question of all the plugins you are going to use should be on the tracks already, ready to work. So you don't have to pull things up while you're working. That makes a big difference. But then you get your EQ, your compression in an hour, maybe 2 if you have to be satisfied with EQ, compression, color, whatever you got, and then balance, right? Your panning, that's all set. Now you spend the next 2 hours or so getting your automation to make the thing feel like something. You can't start with that, because if you wind up EQing things, what an EQ is really a volume ride on a fader, but it's within a certain frequency band. That's what you're doing. So if you decide I'm going to EQ after I automate, that will often make everything that you just automated not work, or now things will stand out way too much. So the way I look at it is get rid of this, like work in a way that makes sense. For me, I got to get my EQ, compression, all that set, my balance good, my panning is all done at the very beginning. Usually in this order: volumes of all the tracks, panning goes along with that, dial in EQ, maybe some compression if needed. If you need to control dynamic range, don't just do it to do it. Also, if you want to move and manipulate grooves of how things feel, make them feel a little more aggressive and fast, or a little more laid back, and, kind of slow it down a little. Compression could be used for all these things, but EQ and compression at that point, then I dedicate half the time of what I'm going to be spending on the mix to let's really dial in what I want to feature where. What downbeat should have, a little more kick on it, a little more snare? Where are the cymbal rides that I want to push up? When do I want the vocal, when am I losing the lead vocal that I need to make clear? The ends of all the phrases where real personality comes in on the vocals. Do I want to ride those up so I can hear who the singer really is and start to bring them to the forefront? When am I automating the guitar if there's lead guitar? The same kind of thing, ends of phrases where, little things happen. Maybe we need more of those. It's just this becomes a game of push-pull. And I'm telling you, there's not a one way to work kind of thing, but this is specifically why I think my mixes are substantially improved when I use the method I use by basically using the UF8 for 8 channels that winds up being everything in the mix. Because automating one thing at a time is also, in my opinion, a huge negative. It's part of the reason why guys like Bob Clearmountain, CLA, anybody who uses a desk, Tom Lord Algae, it's part of the reasons why their mixes sound as good as they do, is because they're sort of moving multiple things at once. So by setting up 8 faders, and the reason I don't have 16, just so everyone's on the same page, is because there's no real way to be able to put that in the right spot. My workflow has been honed and changed and over the years to be okay, this works because I could see the 8 things, I can put it in front of me, and it's logical to assume I can break a mix down into 8 elements. Verse vocals, chorus vocals, guitars, keyboards, bass, drums, and whatever auxiliary other stuff. We're basically sitting around 8 faders. So when I'm automating everything at one time. If I'm going to do one at a time something, maybe it's a lead vocal or something, because you want to make leave the rest the same and you just want to make sure that nudges up, great. But the better you get at create a way that you can automate more than one thing at once, which is why it's particularly hard to do with a mouse, although I know some guys who do it, and sometimes I'll use a mouse to automate one thing at a time, but I just find it way more helpful to automate multiple things. But I don't scroll through banks. I hate that. And I have not found a better way, even using the SSL, their own mixer part of it. I don't like it. I just leave 8 faders on that never change. Everything's always in the same place so that it's like I'm working on the part of the desk where I would have bust everything, for example. And now I got all my drums on one fader, all my bass on one fader, all my vocals, verse vocals, one fader, chorus vocals, one fader, that kind of thing. Or sometimes it's lead vocals, one fader, background vocals, one fader. You get me? So I always break it down in the same way, so everything's in the same place, so that way when it's time to automate, I don't have to think. I just listen. I try to do it with my eyes closed so that I can really just, okay, grab that a little bit. Okay, I don't mean total eyes closed, but I'm not staring at the screen is my point. I'm looking more at the faders. I'm looking down and going, all right, I need a little more bass, need a little more guitar. Oh, mess that up, hit stop, rewind a little, play it again, do that. I'm doing that. And I'm doing full passes of the song. That's another move I think people don't do enough, where they'll really focus on automating a part at a time. Try to get through a whole pass of the entire song, and if you mess something up, run it again, because just that will tell you so much as you listen to it again, because you'll forget that little moment you think you messed up. And then you might realize it wasn't as bad as I thought. It's actually good. I like how I made the mistake of making this too loud there. That wound up being good. The happy accidents come out. You know, when we're recording instruments, there's happy accidents all over the place. And you got to pick them up. You got to grab them. And with mixing, I find it's the same thing. Mixing with automation is like playing an instrument. And that's the beauty of it. It's also never going to be repeatable. Like, that's why it needs to be recorded the way you do it. There could be a magic in a moment that you create. I'm saying you should really look for those and live on those. It will make, if nothing else, it makes what you're doing more fun. And could you do this with a mouse? Sure, you can. But I recommend, if you can help it, not, because it's easier to do 8 things at once. Whereas with the mouse, you're going to click one fader a little bit up here, a little, then you got to move to another fader and click that up. I've done it both ways. It's definitely easier to do it with multiple faders. But I don't see a need for 16 because they could never be all in front of me where I would always also know what they all are without reading the top, which is the worst part. That's the worst part. The reason guys on consoles can work so efficiently is because they put everything in the same place every time. That's the number one thing with people who use consoles. So the reason these surfaces never really worked is because you can't get everything in one place. So you're forced to sort of make it where it is all the same in one place and just forego your ability to control the kick drum up or down. You get that right when you get the mix set in a way you like. Now you're going to decide the drum balance, and maybe you're going to break the drums into 2 faders. Sometimes I'll do that where I got my skins on one, or sometimes just kick, sometimes kick and snare on one fader. You know, it's kind of a Bob Clearmountain thing. You have the ability to do whatever you want with kick and snare on a fader, and then next to it is the rest. So come up with the way that it makes sense to you. It's literally, that's half the battle of what we do, is keep trying different ways to work till you find one that makes sense to you. And then guess what? 6 months from then or 2 months, you may change it again, because that's something I noticed from basically when I used the Browerized method and kind of changed it to my own style. I used it for long enough that I realized, you know, it was great at one point. Then I stopped liking it. But in hindsight, when I moved away from it, I realized the magic within it was that I had my VCAs all on the 8 faders all the time, and it sort of just allowed for a different result than by not working in that way. It just something about grouping drums and bass to one place to compress them as a group instead of kind of doing everything separately on its own bus, which then fed into a mix bus. You know, just sort of grouping the things that made sense to group prior to hitting a mix bus is a very nice way to work, I found, especially when you like to do the automation thing we like to do. Because when you set those 4 channels, you know, the way he works, he sends his stuff to, or maybe he changed it. He could have changed it, honestly, at this point. But you send the stuff to those 4 places, and then if I ride a fader, let's say for drums, now it's going to win the battle slightly against the bass that's within the one track being compressed. It's on one stereo track. And by that happening, it's like the drums are going to push forward because the compressor is going to decide, okay, the drums are now louder. So the bass will naturally sort of get out of the way a little bit. And it will still allow you to maintain your, you know, relative balance, so to speak, on the other things like vocals or guitars. So it just sort of kind of does a natural ducking thing in the groups. That was a very big difference than just relying on your mix bus compressor to do that, because in my opinion, you don't want the mix bus compressor working particularly hard. That's my opinion. Even if you have 2 of them or 3 of them, if you do, it's probably each of them working very, very little, very slightly. So as a result, just using the groups prior to that and maybe hitting those a little bit harder, you have sort of that push-pull you want. The way you decide to automate will be different every single time. It's so much fun. I don't know. Just talking about it makes me excited. Hit the comment section. I appreciate it. Anything I may have missed or anything about the history you want to throw in there, I'd love to hear it. Evan Jaffe, Custom Cut Studios. You guys got this. Have fun. Take it easy.